Here with me at the family table, Semafor political reporter Dave Weigel, Kaiser Family Foundation Health News Chief Washington correspondent Julie Rovner, and CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Sganga. I'm glad all of you are here. Happy Monday. Thanks for being here. Julie, I want to go to you first because, and I want to set this up for you, ladies and gentlemen, today is an important day in Washington in the Senate because the Finance Committee has just dropped the legislative details on the president's economic agenda, and there's some important details about Medicaid. Please catch us up.
That's right. There had been a lot of complaints from the House about how deeply Medicaid was being cut, and there was some thought that the Senate might go a little bit less deep.
Might ease off.
Right. They did exactly the opposite. They're actually making the cuts deeper, presumably to pay for other parts of the bills, like some of the tax cuts. But it's going to make it more difficult for states to raise their share of the money that they have to pay for Medicaid. So we'll have to see what the CBO says about, the impact that will have on coverage. But we already know that the House-passed bill would basically end up with 16 million more people uninsured 10 years from now. Now, that includes both what's in the bill and what's not in the bill, the expansion, the continuation of the additional credits that were added during the COVID pandemic for people buying Affordable Care Act coverage.
And I know this information is just becoming available. The legislative text, at least for the Finance Committee, just released. Anything there in terms of changes to Medicare Advantage, which is a highly political sensitive issue? Senate Republicans had sort of gone to the White House, given them a heads up on that. We weren't really sure what the White House read on it is. What do we know so far?
Interestingly, there is bipartisan support for scaling back some of these payments to Medicare Advantage, that many analysts have said they're being overpaid, and the insurers are figuring out ways to get themselves even more overpaid.
To kind of game the system a little bit.
Yes, and I didn't see anything in the Senate bill doing anything about that. So there was some thought that might happen. It doesn't seem to have happened yet.
Dave, whether you wanted to be or not, you have become this city's most important, or nearly most important, DNC watcher. All the machinations going on with the Democratic National Committee, and there were more this weekend. Catch us up.
Yes, well, David Hogg, who had been elected in February to vice chair and then started to cause problems for the party by saying this is a good time to embrace primary challengers of incumbents who are too old or who are not doing their job. He left rather than face another vote for vice chair. There was a challenge to that election brought in February. It succeeded. He's out, and they're electing, as we speak, we'll learn who took that job. Somebody who's probably going to make less news that the Democrats don't like than David Hogg.
Right. And
at the same time, you saw in the run-up, there are members of these DNC committees who have been there for a very long time. You mentioned labor leaders like Randy Weingarten, really for a generation been part of the party structure, based in D.C., DNC members to the convention. And some of them are leaving over Martin's long-term strategy, which is not even that controversial when you compare it to what Hogg was doing. It is pulling the party back, DNC members back from any role endorsing candidates before an election. They want to be, if you are in the DNC, you're not allowed to do the sort of political activity that you're used to. That was going to infect Weingarten. There's more to this, other disagreements with Democrats, but he is changing the party. And as we know from Politico, which obtained audio of him telling members about this, it's been very unhappy for him. He's had a lot of conflict that has defined who he is before the country got to know this Minnesota Democrat.
Right. And as he articulates it, Dave, and I like your perspective on this, he wants younger voices, more grassroots voices, and not the traditional sort of party, not bosses,
sure,
but party hierarchical entitles in Washington.
Yes, and the leader of the AFT, leaders of major unions not being DNC voting members, that's not necessarily part of the image they want to put in. Even as because look, he is a former labor attorney from the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. They want a labor role in the party. Martin has just in a fairly diplomatic, in front of the scenes, less than behind the scenes way, said there are a lot of people in the party that we need that are not reaching out to new people, and the party has been losing ground with younger people, especially. Look at every demographic, but it's really people under 30 who Democrats thought were natural Democrats for a generation under Barack Obama. They're not coming back. So even though Hogg is young, he's going to be replaced probably by somebody else who's fairly young. These other DNC roles will be filled by people that are aligned more with Martin and probably more active inside the party. But without that caveat of they cannot endorse, they cannot intervene in elections. Figures like Bernie Sanders can, but the DNC is not going to.
Nicole, one of the things that animated the country this weekend were these No Kings protests, which also had at least an undercurrent, in some cases, in some cities, an overcurrent about immigration. And there were some changes and some redirections announced by the president over the weekend.
Yeah, on the part of President Trump, Major, at best, this is mixed signals on a key signature issue for this president. And at worst, it's policy whiplash. But like all things Trump, there is a political motivation behind it. So to catch our viewers up, Thursday, several days into those LA targeted operations and protests that we saw in California, Trump announced that he planned to change the enforcement tactics to protect farmers and people in hotel and leisure businesses. He posted on Truth Social. He said he was getting feedback from folks in those businesses that his immigration policy was taking good workers off of the playing field. 72 hours later, he returned to Truth Social with another immigration missile, so to speak, and he directed ICE to expand deportation efforts in blue cities, saying, quote, "You don't hear about sanctuary cities in our heartland." The president called on ICE to do everything in his power to meet those very high deportation quotas, 3,000 a day. That's about twice as what we're seeing on busy days for ICE right now. Why did this pivot happen? Well, it's because prior to that Thursday announcement in Omaha, Nebraska, a state that voted for Trump by nearly 20 points, there was an immigration raid at Glen Valley Foods, a big food processing center. And there was some feedback, some criticism, rare criticism, Major, from Republicans who said, wait a minute, this is a sector that is already facing economic headwinds, trade uncertainty, to say nothing of the labor shortages that we've seen. And can you redirect this immigration message elsewhere? Thank you very little. And so we saw that pivot from the president to speak more about blue cities, sanctuary cities. The question now, we have seen an uptick by 25% in the number of detention of migrants in the United States, unauthorized migrants. But the deportation numbers have held steady. So can the president reach that quota while focusing on blue cities instead of the heartland? I think he's going to be hard-pressed to do that.
Nicole Sganga, Dave Weigel, Julie Rovner, thank you very much for joining me at the family table. I appreciate it very much. We had a lot to cover there, and you all did it expertly. Thank you so much.